So welcome to the third and final installment in this series. Today we'll look at the assignments for week 3. Our starting point is the page you see here. This is what we had after week 2. So we had the display of the text, the facsimile, some metadata in a sidebar. And we're going to create a standalone edition based on our ODD and this template we created. To do so, we go to the admin menu, click on App Generator, and this now looks slightly different than what you may be used to because it's a development version of tei-publisher, and here I introduced the possibility to select multiple odds, whereas the previous version only allowed you to select one. But never mind, we select this Wolf, which is my ODD I created. Then we have to choose some URL, which does not need to be a real URL. It just has to be unique, so you can the app can be uniquely identified within exist. So I call this wdodis and use the same as short name wdodis, then dodis workshop sample. As HTML template I choose my own, which I created last week. Then I leave default view and default full text index as they are. And for the user, I could create a new user, but I will just reuse the already known user TI with password simple. Next, I click on Save Generate, and it takes a little while because it will create directories and the general structure of the app and copy things. So now it has been generated. I can click on open, and what I see, basically looks like tei-publisher as we know it. However, it's now a dedicated app package just for our dodis workshop sample. So we can upload the documents here again. So click on one and see how it looks like. Well, obviously it directly applies the correct ODD and the correct template, because within the app it already knows which ODD and template we have chosen when creating it. So everything is already in place. Obviously it still looks very much like tei-publisher, so first thing we may want to do is to change the logo into something more custom. So this we should do via Excite. So we go to Excite and first upload a logo, and it should go into resources, images, and click on upload. Then I navigate to the workshop directory, which I checked out from GitHub. And there I have 3 images, and I will just upload all 3 of them. Okay, so now I have the images in there. My logo will be called logo.png, simple enough. So I can try to fit this in. To make it appear within my template, well, if I open the template, so that's again as we know it in templates, pages, dodis Wolf. Yeah, so there's no logo in here, as you will see when browsing through it, because the logo actually is in this included file, which is templates menu.html. So we open that, which it's one layer above menu.html, and here we have the logo. So we change this into our logo.png, save, go back to the page, reload, and as expected the logo is there, but it's yeah, a bit screwed, so we have to adjust the size. As I told you during the last session, there are like two levels of styling in tei-publisher. One deals with the general layout of the page, the general look and feel of the generated standalone edition. So it governs things like yeah, the logo, the menu bar, the toolbar, backgrounds, and so on. It also has various settings which are declared as CSS variables, which are used to fine-tune various things on the page, like default font faces being used and stuff like this. There's a second layer at which we will look in another assignment, which deals with the display of the text rendered through ODD itself. So those are the two layers, and to start with, we need to address things now on layer 1, which means the general look and feel of the page. As I explained, there's one central theme.css which governs all this. However, we will not overwrite it or change it directly, but we will create another CSS file where we selectively change things mentioned in theme.css. So we go to Excite. We basically say new, switch to CSS, click on create, and to change the logo image, we need to add a rule.logo image, and we want to set the width to auto and the height to auto, yeah, and the background size to 100%. So that's all written down in the assignments. So then we save this, and we save it to resources CSS. We have to give it a name, and we can just call it dodis theme.css. Okay, so next we also need to import this into HTML, into our HTML, and after theme.css. So theme.css is imported here, and we need to, oh, I already had a custom theme here, so I renamed this into dodis theme. Yeah, so theme.css has to come first, and then dodis theme.css to selectively override things defined in theme.css. So we save this, go back to our page, click on reload, and we have the logo. So we changed the logo successfully for our template page, but if we go back to the start page, you see that those changes do not apply there. Why is this? Yeah, well, index.html, that's the central the main page of the app, and it does not have the same menu as our template, so it's defined in a different file called index.html, obviously, and we have to apply the same changes there. So we go back to Excite, we go to the root of our application, click on index.html, and then we have to do the same changes there. So import our dodis theme.css after theme.css, locate the logo, where is it? Here is it, and change this to logo.png. So going back to our workshop sample page, reload, and we can see the new logo has been applied. Next, we were changing the background image for the header to show this image of Berlin Wall as a background. So we're going to Excite, and in this theme.css we need to override one CSS variable which is defined in theme.css and is called PB header background image. So this points to an optional background image. So most of the CSS variables are set within the body, so the root of the HTML document content. So in there we define our CSS variable PB header background image, and it should be images, and what was the name? bg header.jpg. So let's save this and go back to our page, reload again, and see what happens. Oops, nothing yet. Why is that? Probably because this also has a background color, so our background image is kind of hidden by the color. So we also need to override the background color. There's another variable for that, and it's a different one for PB menu bar and PB toolbar. So we need to change both. Background color, and we set this to none. And we basically just copy and set PB toolbar background color also to none. Go back to our page, reload again, and voila, there we are. So now let's see if it also applies to the text view. Yes. However, now everything is a bit difficult to read. In particular, the icons on the toolbar are very hard to see, but also the entries in the menu in this white color are hard to read. So we need to change that somewhat. So my suggestion was to darken the background. So we're going back to Excite. And one way to darken something is to use an Rgb Alpha Channel. So what we do is we define an RGB color with all three color values set to 0, which means it will essentially be black. Yeah. So if we left it like this, it would again hide our background image, but we will add transparency, which is defined in the fourth number. And well, the numbers you can use here are numbers between 0 and 255. In this case, we will make it, here it's between 0 and 1. And we will use something in the middle, say 0.7. And for the toolbar, we do the same, but let's say slightly darker. So let's try 0.3. Go back, reload the page. Okay, so that's better. However, the icons on the toolbar are still not very visible, so we need to change them from black to some whitish color. So this is another variable, PB toolbar color, and we just set it to white. Save, go back, reload, and there we are. So the next assignment was to add a static page to our application. Let's say something describing the purpose of the project. So we want an about page. I already prepared one in TI, Why TI? Because using TI we can use the same mechanisms which we also use for the DODIS documents themselves, so don't need to change anything. It would also be possible to just use a plain HTML page, or tei-publisher also has the possibility to display Markdown. So all that could be done. However, we will just use the provided TI about page. So we're going to start and then click on upload, select the about.xml contained in the workspace GitHub folder, upload it, and you see here we now have this about the project page. So clicking on it, yeah, we see the text. However, something is wrong with our template. Why is that? Well, if we go to Excite and open the template, open the file, the about file, then we see that this switches the template via a processing instruction from the default, what was it called, dodiswolf.html to view.html. So view.html is the single page template. Yeah, we cannot use DODIS, Wolf DODIS, because that includes a facsimile, and we don't have a facsimile for this about page. However, what we did not do is to change view.html in the same way as we changed DODIS Wolf. Yeah, so if we open our template again, templates, pages, where is it, DODIS Wolf, we were including this DODIS theme, so we are copying it and apply the same to the default single page view.html, and just insert the line here. So, and then let's see if this has helped. Yes, so now everything looks just like on our text view page. However, there is one little detail which is not ideal yet, namely that if we go to the start page, we now have this about the project in our document list. So that's bad for users and just confusing, so we will remove it from here. This can be done by opening another file. This time it's an Xgray file, but don't fear, it's just a configuration file with a certain number of variables through which you can influence central settings of tei-publisher and apps generated from it. So we go to modules and open config.xqm, and in there should be a variable which defines the data root where we are getting the TI data from, but it also defines a variable called data exclude. And this is a sequence, so all we need to do is to add another exclude to our sequence. So we put it into parentheses because we are specifying multiple items, and we can just copy the line above, but it's not, our file is not called taxonomy.xml but about.xml. So, and then we need to close the parentheses and just save, go back to the sample, reload the page, and as you can see, the about.xml has disappeared. So next we would like to also link to the static page from our menu bar. So what's above here? Again, there are two different menu bars, one for the index.html page and one for the document view, so we would need to change both. So let's go back to Excite then, and we have to look into menu.html first. And there essentially we can just copy the menu entry for start, insert it below, and then we can change it accordingly to about. And instead of index.html, we are calling about.xml. So there's some magic going on here. You can see this $app parameter. This points to the root of the application. So this is just to make sure that if you are looking at the page further down in the hierarchy, the link to about.xml will still lead to about.xml immediately beneath the root of the app. So this parameter is available everywhere in tei-publisher, and there's just some magic needed, which is introduced with this data template attribute, which calls exists server-side templating to replace this $app variable with the correct value. Okay, so let's try this out. We are going back to our workshop sample page, then look into one of the documents, and as you can see, we now have this about menu up there. If we click on it, we get to our about page. So this was for the documents. Now we need to do the same for index.html. So we are just copying the line, go to index.html, and then again after start, we just insert what we copied. Go back to the page, click on reload, and there we have this about menu. For the next assignment, we would like to move some of the CSS styles we directly encoded within the odd models using output rendition into a separate style sheet, which is linked to our ODD. So for this, we go back to our ODD, and if we open up this top bar, we see some settings associated with our ODD. And one of those is an external CSS file. So the path here should always be relative to the location of the ODD, and it's best to keep this CSS file within the same collection as the ODD. So we can just name it something like custom.css or so, or custom.this CSS. Then we need to create this file. So for this we go to Excite, and then just as before, we do new document, select CSS, create, and now we can start writing. So the first thing we would like to do is to extract the CSS rule for first name, which is currently defined in output rendition, into a general CSS class. So say here we could have a CSS class called first name, and we can just assign it an orange color, and then we save this file into the same collection as the ODD. So this was custom.this.css. So going back to our ODD, we have custom.this. Was this right? Custom.this, yes. We should now be able to change our model for first name, remove the output rendition we define here, click on delete, and instead define a CSS class first name, which I already did here before. So now we need to save the ODD, because those linked CSS styles, they will be compiled together with the ODD into a general CSS connected to this ODD. So we just save, go back to the workshop sample, select the document, and yeah, we are seeing names of people in orange. And just to test, we may want to use a different color. Say we turn this into green, and then we have to go back to the auto editor again and save again to recompile the CSS into the ODD transformation code. We switch back to our page, reload, and now hopefully names should be in green. Okay, that was not a very good choice because we're already using green elsewhere, but never mind, it does work. So we can also use this newly created CSS file to change general HTML element properties for text displayed by this ODD. So say we want to change the links, like the ones here, from a blue color to, say no color and just underlined. So we can do this, going back to our CSS. The HTML element for links is called A. So we can just overwrite this here. So we say color, we could say color black or so, but actually we just want to use the normal text color for which there is this CSS property inherit. So we save, and then also save the ODD again, go back to the same sample, reload, and let's see what happened. Okay, so all the links have lost their blue color as intended. At this point, let's just assume that we are happy with the results we have achieved so far with our app. And we would just like to download this app as a distributable package. Then maybe unpack it, later on commit it to Git, pass it on to other people, to colleagues, to have a review, whatever, to install it on a server, to make it publicly available, and so on. So the easiest way to do that is to just go to the administration menu and click on Download App as XOR. So this will generate an application package in the background ending in .xor. We already know .xor, that's this special packaging format. Basically a standardized zip format which contains all the necessary information for Exist to reinstall this application on an Exist instance. So once we have the XOR, we could unpack it into a directory. So say we create a directory here using the same name as our app. Then we cd into it. Then we just unzip what we downloaded. And we now have basically the same structure on disk, representing our application as it was within exist. We could now commit this to GitHub, for example, to have it under version control. I will skip that for now. But we could also repackage, so make changes here locally, and then repackage the whole thing into another XOR, which we could pass on, re-upload to our exist instance, upload to a different server, and so on. To repackage the whole app, all I have to do is to call Apache Ant, the build tool we are using. So I just type Ant, and this basically generates me a new XOR inside my build directory. And I could now just upload this freshly created XOR via the dashboard into an otherwise empty exist instance or an exist instance running other apps, doesn't matter. But it would recreate exactly the setup of this app we created. Okay, so that's it for this workshop. I hope you had some fun, made some progress, got some questions answered, and yeah, see you soon again.